poetry?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I said
Yeah,
there's,
it's after that. It's about 2 pages from that.
really,
I swapped you around with Orlin.
Let me just
In
mention
fact,
to
it's 4 lines of poetry just above it. Bend down your faces, Una and Ali.
okay. I'm sorry. Just go ahead and I'll catch up.
Okay. All right, well, let me mention to whoever might be watching the video that we're continuing with chapter 5, A Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. And if you go to the Facebook group, you'll see that I put the page numbers and a keyword sentence if you want to read along while watching the video. And with that said, off we will go. Let me make sure, yep, we have a reading list, okay. The park trees were heavy with rain, and rain fell still and ever in the lake, lying gray like a shield. A game of swans flew there, and the water in the shore beneath was fouled with their green-white slime. They embraced softly, impelled by the gray, rainy light, the wet, silent trees, the shield like witnessing lake, the swans. They embraced without joy or passion, his arm around his sister's neck. A gray woolen cloak was strapped athwart her from her shoulder to her waist, and her fair head was bent in willing shame. He had loose brown hair and tender, shapely, strong, freckled hands. Face? There was no face seen. The brother's hair was bent upon her fair, rain, fragrant hair. The hand, freckled and strong and shapely and caressing, was Davin's hand. He frowned angrily upon his thought and on the shriveled mannequin who had called it forth. For his father's jibes at the Bantry gang leapt out of his memory. He held them at a distance and brooded uneasily on his own thought again. Why were they not Cranley's hands? Had Davin's simplicity and innocence stung him more secretly? Next, please.
He walked on across the hall with Dixon, leaving Cranley to take leave elaborately of the dwarf. Under the colonnade temple was standing in the midst of a little group of students. One of them cried, "Dixon, come over here till you hear. Temple is in grand form." Temple turned on him his dark gypsy eyes. "You're a hypocrite, O'Keefe," he said. "And Dixon is a smiler. By hell, I think that's a good literary expression." He laughed shyly, looking in Stephen's face, repeating, "By hell, I'm delighted with that name, a smiler." A stout student who stood below them on the steps said, "Come back to the Mistress, Temple. We want to hear about that." He had faith, Temple said, and he was a married man too, and all the priests used to be dining there. By hell, I think they all had a touch. "We shall call it riding a hack to spare the hunter," said Dixon. "Tell us, Temple," O'Keefe said, "how many quarts of porter have you in you?" "All your intellectual soul is in that phrase, O'Keefe," said Temple with open scorn. He moved with a shambling gait round the group and spoke to Stephen. "Do you know that the Forsters are the kings of Belgium?" he said. Cranley came out through the door of the entrance hall, his hat thrust back on the nape of his neck, and picking his teeth with care. "And here's the wiseacre," said Temple. "Do you know that about the Fosters?" Next, please.
Joan, you have to turn on your microphone. And here's
Cranley. Cranley? Cranley
Uh,
came
yeah, that's
out.
fine.
Yeah, Cranley came out through the door of the entrance hall, his hat thrust back on the nape of his neck and picking his teeth with care. And here's the wiseacre, said Temple. Do you know that about the Forsters? He paused for an answer. Cranley dislodged a fig seed from his teeth on the point of his rude toothpick and gazed at it intently. The Forsters family, Temple said, is descended from Baldwin, the first king of Flanders. He was called the Forester. Forester and Forster are the same name. A descendant of Baldwin I, Captain Francis Forster, settled in Ireland and married the daughter of the last chieftain of Clan Brazil. Then there are the Blake Forsters. That's a different branch. From Baldhead, King of Flanders, Cranley repeated, rooting again deliberately at his gleaming, uncovered teeth. Where did you pick up all that history? O'Keefe asked. I know all the history of your family, too, Temple said, turning to Stephen. Do you know that Giraldus Cambrensis says about your family? Is he descended from Baldwin, too? Asked a tall, consumptive student with dark eyes. Baldhead, Cranley repeated, sucking at a crevice in his teeth. Pernobilis et pervestusta familia, Temple said to Stephen. The stout student who stood below them on the steps farted briefly. Dixon turned toward him, saying in a soft voice, Did an angel speak? Next, please.
Cranley turned also and said vehemently, but without anger, Goggins, you're the flamingest dirty devil I ever met, do you know? I had it on my mind to say that, Goggins answered firmly. It did no one any harm, did it? We hope, Dixon said suavely, that it was not the kind known to science as a paulo post futurum. Didn't I tell you he was a smiler, said Temple, turning left and right. Didn't I give him that name? You did. We're not deaf, said the tall consumptive. Cranley still frowned at the stout student below him. Then, with a snort of disgust, he shoved him violently down the steps. Go away from here, he said rudely. Go away, you stinkpot, and you are a stinkpot. Goggins skipped down onto the gravel and at once returned to his place with good humor. Temple turned back to Stephen and said, Do you believe in the law of heredity? Are you drunk, or what are you trying to say? Asked Cranley, facing around on him with an expression of wonder. The most profound sentence ever written, Temple said with enthusiasm, is the sentence at the end of the zoology. Reproduction is the beginning of death. Next, please.
Pass on my turn this time, please.
Say it again, Donna.
Sorry, could I pass on my turn? I'm sort of lost. So
Okay.
whoever's next.
So that's going to be Joe. Joe, are you ready?
He touched Stephen timidly at the elbow and said eagerly, Do you feel how profound that is because you are a poet? Cranley pointed his long forefinger. Look at him, he said with scorn to the others. Look at Ireland's hope. They laughed at his words and gesture. Temple turned on him bravely, saying, Cranley, you're always sneering at me. I can see that. But I'm as good as you any day. Do you know what I think about you now as compared to myself? My dear man, said Cranley urbanely, you are incapable, do you know, absolutely incapable of thinking. But do you know, Temple went on, what I think of you and of myself, you and myself compared together? Out with it, Temple, the stout student cried from the steps. Get it out in bits. Temple turned right and left, making sudden feeble gestures as he spoke. I'm a bollocks, he said, shaking his head in despair. I am. and I know I am. And I admit it, that I am. Dixon patted him lightly on the shoulder and said mildly, and it does you every credit, Temple. But he, Temple said, pointing to Cranley, is a bollocks too, like me. Only he doesn't know it. And that's the only difference I see. A burst of laughter covered his words, but he turned again to Stephen and said with a sudden eagerness, that word is a most interesting word. That's the only English dual number. Did you know that? Is it? Stephen said vaguely. He was watching Cranley's firm-featured, suffering face, lit up now by a smile of false patience. The gross name had passed over it like foul water, poured over an old stone image, patient of injuries. And as he watched him, he saw him raise his hat in salute and uncover the black hair that stood stiffly from his forehead like an iron crown. She passed out from the porch of the library and bowed across Stephen in reply to Cranley's greeting. He also. Was there not a slight flush on Cranley's cheek? Or had it come forth at Temple's words? The light had waned, he could not see. Did that explain his friend's listless silence, his harsh comments, the sudden intrusions of rude speech with which he had shattered so often Stephen's ardent, wayward confessions? Stephen had forgiven freely, for he had found this rudeness also in himself. And he remembered an evening when he had dismounted from a borrowed, creaking bicycle to pray to God in a wood near Malahide. He had lifted up his arms and spoken in ecstasy to the sombre nave of the trees, knowing that he stood on holy ground and in a holy hour. And when two constabulary men had come into sight around the bend in the gloomy road, he'd broken off his prayer to whistle loudly an air from the last pantomime. He began to beat the frayed end of his ash plant against the base of a pillar. Had Cranley not heard him? Yet he could wait. Well, the talk about him ceased for a moment, and a soft hiss fell again from a window above. But no other sound was in the air, and the swallows whose flight he had followed with idle eyes were sleeping. Next, please.
Is that me? Okay, she had passed through the dusk, and therefore the air was silent save for one soft hiss that fell. And therefore the tongues about him had ceased their babble, and darkness was falling. Darkness falls from the air. A trembling joy, a lambent as a faint light, played like a fairy host around him. But why? Her passage through the darkening air, or the verse with its black vowels and its opening sound, rich and lute-like? He walked away slowly towards the deeper shadows at the end of the colonnade, beating the stone softly with his stick to hide his reverie from the students whom he had left, and allowed his mind to summon back to itself the age of Dowland and Bird and Nash. Eyes opening from the darkness of desire, eyes that dimmed the breaking east. What was their languid grace but the softness of chambering? And what was their shimmer but the shimmer of the scum that mantled the cesspool of the court of a slobbering steward? And he tasted in the language of memory ambered wines, dying fallings of sweet airs, the proud pavan, and saw with eyes of memory kind gentlewomen in Covent Garden, wooing from their balconies and sucking mouths, and the pox-fouled wenches of the taverns, and young wives that gaily yielding to their ravishers clipped and clipped again. Next.
The images he had summoned gave him no pleasure. They were secret and inflaming, but her image was not entangled by them. That was not the way to think of her. It was not even the way in which he thought of her. Could his mind then not trust itself? Old phrases, sweet only with a disinterred sweetness, like the fig seeds Cranley rooted out of his gleaming teeth. It was not thought nor vision, though he knew vaguely that her figure was passing homeward through the city. Vaguely first, and then more sharply he smelt her body. A conscious unrest seized in his blood. Yes, it was her body he smelt, a wild and languid smell, the tepid limbs over which his music had flowed desirously, and the secret soft linen upon which her flesh distilled odor and a dew. Next, please.
Orla, do you want to go? I can go in after you then.
Okay, thank you. A lout crawled over the nape of his neck, and putting his thumb and forefinger deftly beneath his loose collar, he caught it. He rolled its body, tender yet brittle as a grain of rice, between thumb and finger for an instant before he let it fall from him and wondered would it live or die. There came to his mind a curious phrase from Cornelius, a lapide, which said that the lice born of human sweat were not created by God with the other animals on the sixth day, but the tickling of the skin of his neck made his mind raw and red. The life of his body, ill-clad, ill-fed, louse-eaten, made him close his eyelids in a sudden spasm of despair, and in the darkness he saw the brittle, bright bodies of lice falling from the air and turning often as they fell. Yes, and it was not darkness that fell from the air, it was brightness. Brightness falls from the air. He had not even remembered rightly Nash's line. All the images it had awakened were false. His mind bred vermin. His thoughts were lice born of the sweat of sloth. Next, please.
He came back quickly along the colonnade towards the group of students. Well then, let her go and be damned to her. She could love some clean athlete who washed himself every morning to the waist and had black hair in his chest. Let her. Cranley had taken another dried fig from the supply in his pocket and was eating it slowly and noisily. Temple sat on the pediment of a pillar, leaning back, his cap pulled down on his sleepy eyes. A squat young man came out of the porch, a leather portfolio tucked under his armpit. He marched towards the group, striking the flags with the heels of his boots and with the ferrule of his heavy umbrella. Then raising the umbrella in salute, he said to all, "Good evening, sirs." He stroked the flags again and tittered while his head trembled with a slight nervous movement. The tall consumptive student and Dixon and O'Keefe were speaking in Irish and did not answer him. Then turning to Cranley, he said, "Good evening, particularly to you." He moved the umbrella in indication and tittered again. Cranley, who was still chewing the fig, answered with loud movements of his jaw. "Good, yes, it is a good evening." The squat student looked at him seriously and shook his umbrella gently and approvingly. "I can see," he said, "that you are about to make obvious remarks." Cranley answered, holding out what remained of the half-chewed fig and jerking it towards the squat student's mouth in sign that he should eat. The squat student did not eat it, but indulging his special humour, said gravely, still twittering and prodding his face with his umbrella, "Do you intend that?" He broke off, pointed bluntly to the munched pulp of the fig and said loudly, "I allude to that." Cranley said as before. "Do you intend that now?" the squat student said, as ipso facto, or let us say, as so to speak. Next, please.
Dixon turned aside from his group, saying, "Goggins was waiting for you, Glenn. He had gone round into the Adelphi to look for you and Moynihan. What have you there?" he asked, tapping the portfolio under Glenn's arm. Examination papers, Glenn answered. I give them monthly examinations to see that they are profiting by my million. He also tapped the portfolio and coughed gently and smiled. Tuition, said Cranley rudely. I suppose you mean the barefooted children that are taught by a bloody ape like you. God help them. He bit off the rest of the fig and flung away the butt. I suffer little children to come unto me, Glenn said amiably. A bloody ape, Cranley repeated with emphasis, and a blasphemous bloody ape. Temple stood up and pushing past Cranley addressed Glenn. That phrase you said now, he said, is from the New Testament about suffer the children to come to me. Go to sleep again, Temple, said O'Keefe. Very well then, Temple continued, still addressing Glenn. And if Jesus suffered the children to come, why does the church send them all to hell if they die unbaptized? Why is that? Were you baptized yourself, Temple? The consumptive student asked. But why are they sent to hell if Jesus said they were all to come? Temple said, his eyes searching in Glenn's eyes. Glenn coughed and said gently, holding back with difficulty the nervous twitter in his voice and moving his umbrella at every word. And as you remark, if it is thus, I ask emphatically, whence comes this thusness? Because the church is cruel, like all old sinners, Temple said. Are you quite orthodox on that point, Temple? Dixon said suavely. St. Augustine says that about unbaptized children going to hell. Temple answered, because he was a cruel old sinner too. Next, please.
I bow to you, Dixon said, but I had the impression that limbo existed for such cases. Don't argue with him, Dixon, Cranley said brutally. Don't talk to him or look at him. Lead him home with a sugan the way you lead a bleating goat. Limbo, Temple cried. That's a fine invention too, like hell. But with the unpleasantness left out, Dixon said. He turned smiling to the others and said, I think I am voicing the opinions of all present in saying so much. You are, Glenn said in a firm tone. On that point, Ireland is united. He struck the ferrule of his umbrella on the stone floor of the colonnade. Hell, Temple said, I can respect that invention of the gray spouse of Satan. Hell is Roman, like the walls of Romans, strong and ugly. But what is limbo? Put him back into the perambulator, Cranley, O'Keefe called out. Cranley made a swift step toward Temple, halted, stamping his foot, crying as if to a fowl, whoosh! Temple moved away nimbly. Do you know what limbo is? He cried. Do you know what we call a notion like that in Roscommon? Whoosh, blast you, Cranley cried, clapping his hands. Neither my arse nor my elbow, Temple cried out scornfully, and that's what I call limbo. Give us that stick here, Cranley said. He snatched the ash plant roughly from Stephen's hand and sprang down the steps, but Temple, hearing him move in pursuit, fled through the dusk like a wild creature, nimble and fleet-footed. Cranley's heavy boots were heard loudly charging up the quadrangle and then returning heavily, foiled and spurning the gravel at each step. Next, please.
His step was angry, and with an angry, abrupt gesture, he thrust the stick back into Stephen's hand. Stephen felt that his anger had another cause, but, feigning patience, touched his arm lightly and said quietly, Cranley, I told you I wanted to speak to you. Come away. Cranley looked at him for a few minutes and asked, Now? Yes, now, Stephen said. We can't speak here. Come away. They crossed the quadrangle together without speaking. The bird called from Siegfried whistled softly, follow them from the steps of the porch. Cranley turned, and Dixon, who had whistled, called out, Where are you fellows off to? What about that game, Cranley? They parleyed in shouts across the still air about a game of billiards to be played in the Adelphi Hotel. Stephen walked on alone and out into the quiet of Kildare Street, opposite Maples Hotel, He stood to wait, patient again. The name of the hotel, a colourless polished wood, and its colourless, quiet front stung him like a glance of polite disdain. He stared angrily back at the softly lit drawing room of the hotel, in which he imagined the sleek lives of the patricians of Ireland housed in calm. They thought of army commissions and land agents. Peasants greeted them along the roads in the country. They knew the names of certain French dishes and gave orders to Jarvies in high-pitched provincial voices which pierced through their skin-tight accents. How could he hit their conscience, or how cast his shadow over the imaginations of their daughters before their squires begat upon them, that they might breed a race less ignoble than their own? And under the deepened dusk, he felt the thoughts and desires of the race to which he belonged, flitting like bats across the dark country lanes, under trees by the edges of streams and near the pool-mottled bogs. A woman had waited in the doorway as Davin had passed by at night, and offering him a cup of milk, had all but wooed him to her bed, for Davin had the mild eyes of one who could be secret, but him no woman's eyes had wooed. Next, please.
His arm was taken in a strong grip, and Cranley's voice said, "Let us, Eke, go." They walked southward in silence. Then Cranley said, "That blithering idiot, Temple, I swear to Moses, do you know that? I'll be the death of that fellow one time." But his voice was no longer angry, and Stephen wondered why he was thinking of her greeting him under the porch. They turned to the left and walked on as before. When they had gone on so for some time, Stephen said, "Cranley, I had an unpleasant quarrel this evening." "With your people?" Cranley asked. "With my mother." "About religion?" "Yes," Stephen answered. After a pause, Cranley asked, "What age is your mother?" "Not old," Stephen said. "She wishes me to make my Easter duty." "And will you?" "I will not," Stephen said. "Why not?" Cranley said. "I will not serve," answered Stephen. "That remark was made before," Cranley said calmly. "It is made behind now," said Stephen hotly. Cranley pressed Stephen's arm, saying, "Go easy, my dear man. You're an excitable, bloody man, do you know?" He laughed nervously as he spoke, and looking up into Stephen's face with moved and friendly eyes, said, "Do you know that you are an excitable man?" "I dare say I am," said Stephen, laughing also. Their minds, lately estranged, suddenly seemed to have been drawn closer, one to the other. "Do you believe in the Eucharist?" Cranley asked. "I do not," Stephen said. "Do you disbelieve then?" "I neither believe in it nor disbelieve in it," Stephen answered. "Many persons have doubts, even religious persons, yet they overcome them or put them aside," Cranley said. "Are your doubts on that point too strong?" "I do not wish to overcome them," Stephen answered. Cranley, embarrassed for a moment, took another fig from his pocket and was about to eat it when Stephen said, "Don't, please. You cannot discuss this question with your mouth full of a chewed fig." Cranley examined the fig by the light of a lamp under which he halted. Then he smelt it with both nostrils, bit a tiny piece, spat it out, and threw the fig rudely into the gutter. Addressing it as it lay, he said, "Depart from me, ye cursed, into the everlasting fire." Taking Stephen's arm, he went on again and said, "Do you not fear that those words may be spoken to you on the day of judgment?" "What is offered to me on the other hand?" Stephen answered. "An eternity of bliss in the company of the Dean of Studies." Remember, Cranley said that he would be glorified. "Aye," Stephen said, somewhat bitterly, bright, agile, impossible, and above all, subtle. Curious thing, do you know, Cranley said dispassionately, how your mind is supersaturated with the religion in which you say you do not, in which you say you disbelieve. Did you believe in it when you were at school? I bet you did. I did, Stephen answered. And were you happier then? Cranley asked softly. Happier than you are now, for instance. Often happy, Stephen said, and often unhappy. I was someone else then. How someone else? What do you mean by that statement? I mean, Stephen said, that I was not myself as I am now, as I had to become. Orla.
Not as you are now, not as you had to become, Cranley repeated. Let me ask you a question. Do you love your mother? Stephen shook his head slowly. I don't know what your words mean, he said simply. Have you ever loved anyone? Cranley asked. Do you mean women? I am not speaking of that, Cranley said in a colder tone. I ask you if you ever felt love towards anyone or anything. Stephen walked on beside his friend, staring gloomily at the footpath. I tried to love God, he said at length. It seems now I failed. It is very difficult. I tried to unite my will with the will of God, instant by instant. In that, I did not always fail. I could perhaps do that still. Cranley cut him short by asking, Has your mother had a happy life? How do I know? Stephen said. How many children had she? 9 or 10, Stephen answered. Some died. Was your father? Cranley interrupted himself for an instant and then said, I don't want to pry into your family affairs, but was your father what is called well-to-do? I mean, when you were growing up? Yes, Stephen said. What was he? Cranley asked after a pause. Stephen began to enumerate glibly his father's attributes. Next, please. Anne.
Okay, thank you. A medical student, an oarsman, a tenor, an amateur actor, shouting politician, a small landlord, a small investor, a drinker, a good fellow, a storyteller, somebody's secretary, something in a distillery, a tax gatherer, a bankrupt, and at present a praiser of his own past. Cranley laughed, tightening his grip on Stephen's arm, and said, the distillery is damn good. Is there anything else you want to know? Stephen asked. Are you in good circumstances at present? Do I look it? Stephen asked bluntly. So then, Cranley went on musingly, you were born in the lap of luxury. He used the phrase broadly and loudly, as he often used technical expressions, as if he wished his hearer to understand that they were used by him without conviction. Your mother must have gone through a good deal of suffering, he said then. Would you not try to save her from suffering more, even if, or would you? If I could, Stephen said. That would cost me very little. Then do so, Cranley said. Do as she wishes you to do. What is it for you? You disbelieve in it. It's a form, nothing else, and you will set her mind at rest. He ceased, and Stephen did not reply, remained silent. Then, as if giving utterance to the process of his own thought, he said, whatever else is unsure in this stinking dunghill of a world, a mother's love is not. Your mother brings you into the world, carries you first in her body. What do we know about what she feels? But whatever she feels, it at least must be real. It must be. What are our ideas or ambitions? Play, ideas. Why, that bloody, bleeding goat Temple has ideas. McCann has ideas too. Every jackass going to the roads thinks he has ideas. Stephen, who had been listening to the unspoken speech behind the words, said with assumed carelessness, Pascal, if I remember rightly, would not suffer his mother to kiss him, as he feared the contact of her sex. Pascal was a pig, said Cranley. Aloysius Gonzaga, I think, was the same mind, Stephen said, and he was another pig then, said Cranley. The church calls him a saint, Stephen objected. I don't care a flaming damn what anyone calls him, Cranley said rudely and flatly. I call him a pig. Stephen, preparing the words neatly in his mind, continued. Jesus too seems to have treated his mother with scant courtesy in public, but Suarez, a Jesuit theologian and Spanish gentleman, has apologized for him. Did the idea ever occur to you, Cranley asked, that Jesus was not what he pretended to be? The first person to whom that idea occurred, Stephen answered, was Jesus himself. I mean, Cranley said, hardening in his speech, did the idea ever occur to you that he was himself a conscious hypocrite, what he called the Jews of his time, a whited sepulchre, or, to put it more plainly, that he was a blackguard? That idea never occurred to me, Stephen answered, but I am curious to know, are you trying to make a convert of me or a pervert of yourself? Next.
He turned towards his friend's face and saw there a raw smile which some force of will strove to make finally significant. Cranley asked suddenly in a plain, sensible tone, tell me the truth. Were you at all shocked by what I said? Somewhat, Stephen said. And why were you shocked? Cranley pressed on in the same tone. If you feel sure that your religion is false and that Jesus was not the Son of God. I'm not at all sure of it, Stephen said. He was more like the Son of God than the Son of Mary. And is that why you will not communicate? Cranley asked. Because you're not sure of that too? Because you feel that the host too may be the body and the blood of the Son of God and not a wafer of bread? And because you fear that it may be? Yes, Stephen said quietly. I feel that, and I also fear it. I see, Cranley said. Stephen, struck by his tone of closure, reopened the discussion at once by saying, I fear many things. Dogs, horses, firearms, the sea, thunderstorms, machinery, the country roads at night. But do you fear a bit of bread? I imagine, Stephen said, that there is a malevolent reality behind those things I say I fear. Do you fear then, Cranley asked, that the God of the Roman Catholics will strike you dead and damn you if you made a sacrilegious communion? The God of the Roman Catholics could do that now, Stephen said. I fear more than that, the chemical action which would be set up in my soul by a false homage to a symbol behind which are massed 20 centuries of authority and veneration. Would you, Cranley asked, in extreme danger, commit that particular sacrilege? For instance, if you lived in the penal days? I cannot answer for the past, Stephen said. Possibly not. Then, said Cranley, do you not intend to become a Protestant? I said that I had lost the faith, Stephen answered, but not that I had lost self-respect. What kind of liberation would that be, to forsake an absurdity which is logical and coherent, to embrace one which is illogical and incoherent? Next, please.
They had walked on towards the township of Pembroke, and now as they went on slowly along the avenues, the trees and the scattered lights in the villas soothed their minds. The air of wealth and repose diffused among them seemed to comfort their neediness. Behind a hedge of laurel, A light glimmered in the window of a kitchen, and the voice of a servant was heard singing as she sharpened knives. She sang in the short, broken bars, Rosie O'Grady. Cranley stopped to listen, saying, Moliere cantat. The soft beauty of the Latin word touched with an enchanting touch the dark of the evening, with a touch fainter and more persuading than the touch of music or of a woman's hand. The stripe of their minds was quelled. The figure of a woman as she appeared in the liturgy of the church passed silently through the darkness, a white-robed figure, small and slender as a boy, and with a falling girdle. Her voice, frail and high as a boy's, was heard intoning from a distant choir the first words of a woman, which pierced the gloom and clamour of the first chanting of the Passion. Et tum cum Jehu Galilaeo cras. And all hearts were touched and turned to her voice, shining like a young star, shining clearer as the voice intoned the proper accent, and more faintly as the candles died. The singing ceased. They went on together, Cranley repeating in strongly stressed rhythm the end of the refrain. Next, please.
And when we are married, oh, how happy we'll be. For I love sweet Rosie O'Grady, and Rosie O'Grady loves me. There's real poetry for you, he said. There's real love. He glanced sideways at Stephen with a strange smile and said, Do you consider that poetry, or do you know what the words mean? I want to see Rosie first, said Stephen. She's not easy to find, Cranley said. His hat had come down on his forehead. He shoved it back, and in the shadow of the trees, Stephen saw his pale face, framed by the dark, and his large dark eyes. Yes, his face was handsome, and his body was strong and hard. He had spoken of a mother's love. He felt then the sufferings of women, the weaknesses of their bodies and souls, and would shield them with a strong and resolute arm and bow his mind to them. Away then, it's time to go. A voice spoke softly to Stephen's lonely heart, bidding him go and telling him that his friendship was coming to an end. Yes, he would go. He could not strive against his mother. He knew his part. Probably I shall go away, he said. Where? Cranley asked. Where I can, Stephen said. Yes, Cranley said. It might be difficult for you to live here now. But is it that what makes you go? I have to go, Stephen answered. Because, Cranley continued, you need not look upon yourself as driven away if you do not wish to go, or as a heretic or an outlaw. There are many good believers who think as you do. Would that surprise you? The church is not the stone building, nor even the clergy and their dogmas. It is the whole mass of those born into it. I don't know what you wish to do in life. Is it what you told me the night we were standing outside Harcourt Street station? Yes, Stephen said, smiling in spite of himself at Cranley's way of remembering thoughts and connections with places. The night you spent half an hour wrangling with Doherty about the shortest way from Sally Gap to Laris. Pothead, Cranley said with calm contempt. What does he know about the way from Sally Gap to Laris? Or what does he know about anything for that matter? And the big slobbering washing pot ahead of him. Next, please.
He broke out in a loud, long laugh. Well, Stephen said, do you remember the rest? What you said, is it? Cranley asked. Yes, I remember it. To discover the mode of life or of art whereby your spirit could express itself in unfettered freedom. Stephen raised his hat in acknowledgement. Freedom, Cranley repeated, but you are not free enough yet to commit a sacrilege. Tell me, would you rob? I would beg first, Stephen said. And if you got nothing, would you rob? You wish me to say, Stephen answered, that the rights of property are provisional and that in certain circumstances it is not unlawful to rob. Everyone would act in that belief. So I will not make you that answer. Apply to the Jesuit theologian Juan Mariana de Talavera, who will also explain to you in what circumstances you may lawfully kill your king, and whether you had better hand him his poison in a goblet or smear it for him upon his robe or his saddlebow. Ask me, rather, would I suffer others to rob me, or if they did, would I call down upon them what I believe is called the chastisement of the secular arm? And would you? I think, Stephen said, it would pain me as much to do so as to be robbed. I see, Cranley said. He produced his match and began to clean the crevice between two teeth. Then he said carelessly, tell me, for example, would you deflower a virgin? Excuse me, Stephen said politely, is that not the ambition of most young gentlemen? What then is your point of view? Cranley asked. His last phrase, sour smelling as the smoke of charcoal and disheartening, excited Stephen's brain, over which its fumes seemed to brood. Look here, Cranley, he said. You have asked me what I would do and what I would not do. I will tell you what I will do and what I will not do. I will not serve that in which I no longer believe, whether it call itself my home, my fatherland, or my church, and I will try to express myself in some mode of life or art as freely as I can and as wholly as I can, using for my defense the only arms I allow myself to use, silence, exile, and cunning. Next, please.
Cranley seized his arm and steered him round so as to head back towards Leeson Park. He laughed almost slyly and pressed Stephen's arm with a
Did we lose Donna?
Lost something. Can't hear him.
Okay, I guess whoever is next should pick up the reading then.
With an elder's affection. Cunning indeed, he said. Is it you? You poor poet, you. And you made me confess to you, Stephen said, thrilled by his touch, as I have confessed to you so many other things, have I not? Yes, my child, Cranley said gaily. You made me confess the fears that I have, but I will tell you also what I do not fear. I do not fear to be alone, or to be spurned for another, or to leave whatever I have to leave. And I am not afraid to make a mistake, even a great mistake, a lifelong mistake, and perhaps as long as eternity too. Cranley, now grave again, slowed his pace and said, alone, quite alone. You have no fear of that. And you know what that word means? Not only to be separated from all others, but to have not even one friend. I will take the risk, Stephen said. And not to have any one person, Cranley said, who would be more than a friend, more even than the noblest and truest friend a man ever had. His words seemed to have struck some deep chord in his own nature. He had spoken of himself as he was or wished to be. Stephen watched his face for some moments in silence. A cold sadness was there. He had spoken of himself, of his own loneliness, which he feared. Of whom are you speaking? Stephen asked at length. Cranley did not answer. Donna, do you want to come back in there or move on to Orla?
Did you lose me earlier? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you fell out.
Oh yeah. No. Let's just continue on. Whoever's next.
Orla then would be.
Okay.
March 20. Long talk with Cranley on the subject of my revolt. He had his grand manner on, I supple and suave, attacked me on the score of love for one's mother. Tried to imagine his mother, cannot. Told me once, in a moment of thoughtlessness, his father was 61 when he was born. Can see him, strong farmer type, pepper and salt suit, square feet, unkempt, grizzled beard. Probably attends coursing matches, pays his dues regularly, but not plentifully, to Father Dwyer of Larras. Sometimes talks to girls after nightfall. But his mother? Very young or very old. Hardly the first. If so, Cranley would not have spoken as he did. Old then, probably, and neglected, hence Cranley's despair of soul, the child of exhausted loins. March 21, morning. Thought this in bed last night, but was too lazy and free to add to it. Free, yes. The exhausted loins are those of Elizabeth and Zachary. Then he is the precursor. Item, eats chiefly belly bacon and dried figs. Read locusts and wild honey. Also, when thinking of him, saw always a stern severed head or death mask, as if outlined on grey curtain or veronica. Decollation, they call it in the fold. Puzzled for the moment by St. John at the Latin Gate. What do I see? A decollated precursor trying to pick the lock. Next, please.
Are you there, Anne?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Picked a lot. 21st of March at night. Free, soul free and fancy free. Let the dead bury the dead. Aye, and let the dead marry the dead. March 22nd. In company with Lynch, followed a sizable hospital nurse. Lynch's idea, dislike it. Two lean, hungry greyhounds walking after a heifer. 23rd of March. Have not seen her since that night. Unwell? Sits at the fire, perhaps, with Mama's shawl on her shoulders, but not peevish. A nice bowl of gruel, won't you now? 24th of March. Began with a discussion with my mother. Subject, BVM. Handicapped by my sex and youth. To escape, held up relations between Jesus and Papa against those between Mary and her son. Said religion is not a lying in hospital. Mother indulgent. Said I have a queer mind and have read too much. Not true. Have read little and understood less. Then she and I would come back to faith because I had a restless mind. This means to leave church by the back door of sin and re-enter through the skylight of repentance. Cannot repent. Told her so and asked for sixpence. Got threepence. Then went to college. Other wrangle with little roundhead rogue's eyes scaresy. This time about Bruno the Nolan. Began in Italian and ended in pidgin, English. He said Bruno was a terrible heretic. I said he was terribly burned. He agreed to this with some sorrow. Then gave me a recipe for what he calls risotto alla bergamassa. When he pronounces a soft O, he protrudes his full carnal lips as if he kissed the vowel. Has he? And could he repent? Yes, he could, and cry 2 round rogues' tears, 1 from each eye. Crossing Stevens, that is, my green, remembered that his countrymen, and not mine, had invented what Cranley the other night called our religion. A quartet of them, soldiers of the 97th Infantry Regiment, sat at the foot of the cross and tossed up dice for the overcoat of the crucified. Went to the library and tried to read those 3 reviews. It's useless. She's not out yet. Am I alarmed? About what? That she will never be out again? Blake Road. I wonder if William Bond will die, for assuredly he is very ill. Alas, poor William. Next.
I was once at a diorama in Rotunda. At the end were pictures of big knobs. Among them, William Ewart Gladstone, just then dead. Orchestra played, "Oh, Willie, we have missed you." Ah, a race of clodhoppers. March 25th morning, a troubled night of dreams. Want to get them off my chest. A long curving gallery, when the floor ascend pillars of dark vapors. It is peopled by the images of fabulous kings set in stone. Their hands are folded upon their knees in token of weariness, and their eyes are darkened, for the errors of men go up before them forever as dark vapors. Strange figures advance as from a cave. They're not as tall as men. One does not seem to stand quite apart from another. Their faces are phosphorescent with darker streaks. Peer at me, and their eyes seem to ask me something. They do not speak. March 30th. This evening, Cranley was in the porch of the library, proposing a problem to Dixon and her brother. A mother let her child fall into the Nile, still harping on the mother. A crocodile seized the child. Mother asked it back. Crocodile said, all right, if she told him what he was going to do with the child, eat it or not eat it. This mentality, Lepidus would say, is indeed bred out of your mud by the operation of your son and mine. Is it not true? Then into the Nile mud with it. April 1st. Disapprove of this last phrase. April 2nd. Saw her drinking tea, eating cakes in Johnston's, Mooney or O'Brien's. Rather lynx-eyed Lynch saw her as we passed. He tells me Cranley was invited there by brother. Did he bring his crocodile? Is he the shining light now? Well, I discovered him. I protest I did. Shining quietly behind a bushel of Wicklow bran. Next, please.
April 3rd. Met Davin at the cigar shop opposite Finlay Later's church. He was in a black sweater and had a hurley stick. Asked me was it true I was going away and why. Told him the shortest way to Tara was via Holyhead. Just then my father came up. Introduction. Father polite and observant. Asked Davin if he might offer him some refreshment. Davin could not, was going to a meeting. When we came away, Father told me he had a good honest eye. Asked me why I did join a rowing club. I pretended to think it over. Told me then how he broke Pennyfeather's heart. Wants me to read law. Says I was cut out for that. More mud, more crocodiles. April 5th. Wild spring, scuddy clouds, oh life. Dark stream of swirling bog water on which apple trees have cast down their delicate flowers. Eyes of girls among the leaves, girls demure and romping, all fair or auburn, no dark ones. They blush better. Next, please.
April 6th. Certainly she remembers the past. Lynch said all women do. Then she remembers the time of her childhood, and mine, if ever I was a child. The past is consumed in the present, and the present is living only because it brings forth the future. Statues of women, if Lynch be right, should always be fully draped, one hand of the woman feeling regretfully her own hinder parts. April 6th, later. Michael Robartes remembers forgotten beauty, and when his arms wrap round her, he presses his arms the loveliness which is long faded from the world. Not this, not at all. I desire to press in my arms the loveliness which has not yet come into the world. April 10th. Faintly under the heavy night, through the silence of the city which is turned from dreams to dreamless sleep as a weary lover whom no caresses move, the sound of hoofs upon the road. Not so faintly now as they come near the bridge, and in a moment as they pass the darkened windows, the silence is cloven by alarm as by an arrow. They are heard now far away, hoofs that shine amid the heavy night as gems hurrying beyond the sleeping fields to what journeys hen, what heart, bearing what tidings. Next, please.
April 11 April. Read what I wrote last night. Vague words for a vague emotion. Would she like it? I think so. Then I should have to like it also. 13 April. That tundish has been on my mind for a long time. I looked it up and found it English, and a good old blunt English too. Damn the Dean of Studies and his funnel. What did he come here for, to teach us his own language or to learn it from us? Damn him one way or the other. 14 April. John Alphonsus Mulrennan has just returned from the west of Ireland. European and Asiatic papers, please copy. He told us he met an old man there in a mountain cabin. Old man had red eyes and short pipe. Old man spoke Irish. Mulrennan spoke Irish. Then old man and Mulrennan spoke English. Mulrennan spoke to him about universe and stars. Old man sat, listened, smoked, spat, then said, "Ah, then there must be terrible queer creatures at the latter end of the world. I fear him. I fear his red, horny eyes. It is with him I must struggle all through this night till day come, till he or I lie dead, gripping him by the sinewy throat till what? Till he yield to me? No, I mean him no harm. Next, please."
15 April. Met her today point blank in Grafton Street. The crowd brought us together. We both stopped. She asked me why I never came, said she had heard all sorts of stories about me. This was only to gain time. Asked me, was I writing poems? About whom, I asked her. This confused her more, and I felt sorry and mean. Turned off that valve at once and opened the spiritual heroic refrigerating apparatus invented and patented in all countries by Dante Alighieri. Talked rapidly of myself and my plans. In the midst of it, unluckily, I made a sudden gesture of a revolutionary nature. I must have looked like a fellow throwing a handful of peas into the air. People began to look at us. She shook hands a moment after, and in going away said she hoped I would do what I said. Now I call that friendly, don't you? Yes, I liked her today. A little or much, don't know. I liked her, and it seems a new feeling to me. Then, in that case, all the rest, all that I thought, and all that I felt, all the rest before now, in fact. Oh, give it up, old chap. Sleep it off. Next.
April 16th. Away, away. The spell of arms and voices, the white arms of roads, the promise of close embraces, and the black arms of tall ships that stand against the moon, their tale of distant nations. They are held out to say, we are alone, come. And the voices say with them, we are your kinsmen. And the air is thick with their company as they call to me, their kinsmen making ready to go, shaking the winds of their exultant and terrible youth. Orla.
Mother is putting my new second-hand clothes in order. She prays now. She says that I may learn in my own life and away from home and friends what the heart is and what it feels. Amen. So be it. Welcome, O life. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience and to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. And do you want the last line?
Um, 27th of April, old father, old artificer, stand me now and ever in good stead. From Dublin in 1904 and Trieste in 1914.
Bravo.
Bravo is
Thumbs up.
right.
Wow,
Yeah. Wow.
it's brilliant, really.
That was a lovely reading.
I hope that share screen did not interfere.
Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't find my place, but anyway, it's so emotional at the end, isn't it? You know, like he's gathered his courage to go forward. You could just cry for the challenge ahead, the uncertainty, the goodwill. It's just, I've read this before, but it's just, it never is just information. It's always emotional.
Yes.
Hasn't the pace changed dramatically in the last 10, 20 pages?
Yes.
Where he seems to be more, how would I put it? He's more settled in himself. He's ready to go forward, and his thoughts are clear. The pace, I think, is lovely. It really catches it.
I love that last chapter.
Mm.
That-
And then there's his mother at the end too, packing his suitcase.
Yeah.
His
With
new
the-
second-hand clothes.
Yeah, secondhand
New
clothes.
second-hand.
Yeah. What else would they have?
One thing that makes it so moving is that it's Joyce.
Of course.
These are the feelings that he had.
Yeah.
His feelings toward his mother, toward religion, toward being able to live in Ireland.
Yeah. And as well as that, you know what lies before him
Yes.
in a way that Stephen doesn't yet know.
Way that he doesn't. Yes. I mean, the last pages, particularly when he gets into almost the diary type thing,
Yeah.
it's almost like he realizes that he can't really totally justify what he's doing. He just knows he has to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and therefore he's kind of given up the arguments for doing it. He just knows he has to do it.
Yeah, he needs to express himself in unfettered freedom.
Yeah.
Find that voice. Find
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
And without saying anything, he is doing that most writerly of things, keeping a daily journal,
Yeah.
and he doesn't say, I've now become a writer, I'm going to keep a journal. He just starts doing it.
Yes.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
And that had to be Nora, did it not? The girl who
I
shook
don't
his
think
hand
so.
and told him he should go? No, you don't think so?
That's a that's an interesting difference, actually. That Joyce and the character in here is going to go on his own.
Yeah.
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 And you
And
see,
yet-
Joyce did go on his own. Like he went
Yeah,
in
when he went to
1990
Paris.
He went to Paris to go to medical school.
ostensibly to go to attend medical school. I know.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that was an unconscious excuse to get himself. He just had to get out of Ireland.
Of course. Yeah.
Medical school, of course, turned to be a
The
complete
reason I'm
disaster.
saying that was that his mother was dead when he met Nora.
Mm-hmm.
And he returned at Christmas and had a long Christmas,
Mhm.
which, then went back and then got the telegram and come back again. And then so I think that's Emma or whatever
Yeah,
her name is.
yeah.
Yeah, Emma Cleary.
Emma
Mhm.
Cleary. That's
Yeah.
Because at one stage he speaks about Emma's brother. He's part of the group, so he must have been in college there as well with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Hmm.
Gosh,
But I like that he doesn't, when he says, you made me confess the fears, and we know that he's afraid of thunder and the dark and all
Yeah.
of those things that has come out. But I tell you what I don't fear, and that's to be alone or to be spurred or to leave. And so I can do it,
Mm-hmm.
or even to make a mistake, which is really brave of him. That's lovely.
You know what they say about writers as well, that writing is a very lonely occupation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, kind of he's more or less equipping himself to be a writer by being able to be alone. It's quite an emotional experience, isn't it?
Yes.
I've been around that a few times, but I've never been hit by that end bit like I am now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think the focus is always on the last few lines. That's what's famous.
Yeah.
But the way we've read it tonight gives you a great lead into that.
Mhm.
And I think it gives you a greater sense of fulfillment, maybe.
Yes, I think that's a good way to see it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and the thing is too, he is with each friend, he's describing kind of the I would just say stasis, but the friendship has gotten to a place where it's not going to go further for him, it seems.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
he's
think he actually says that at one stage, doesn't he?
yeah, and it's like he's saying goodbye to each one, but that increases the loneliness that everyone that he has known, he's going through this process of separation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who is the old father? What is that a reference to? Several things, I imagine. Because
Isn't that from Ovid? Or
I
a
think-
version of Ovid?
Yeah. Mhm.
oh,
That the
There's in the
son
back
In the-
reference to the
in-
mythical
calls to
yeah.
the
tablet.
father.
Yeah, it says Daedalus. It says Daedalus here.
Yeah. As he's falling, he calls to the father.
so it's a reference. Okay.
I think.
okay.
Look, I'm working from memory.
Huh.
Could be imagination on my part, but I'm pretty sure it is there somewhere in Ovid.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, but I mean, in reality, Daedalus was the father, right?
As the yeah, a Vicarus.
Yeah.
So it
So-
creates very interesting tension because we have the son with the father's name and with some of the father's traits, but we know that because of his age, etc., that he's both the father and the son at the same time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he's dependent upon this spirit, this artist, artificer spirit
Okay.
to carry him through.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
Mm.
kind of a
Yep.
Yeah.
really
Who he's
interesting-
named after will be his model and guide him, or it's a pattern for him.
Well, this is a prayer.
Mhm.
This is a prayer, April 27th. Old Father, old artificer, stand me now and ever in good stead. That is a prayer.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Not a Catholic prayer, but it
Mm.
is a prayer. So he knows there's something in his soul that's guiding him,
Mm.
or, at least that's how he expresses it to himself. And it's very interesting that he has that right after his mother. Mother is putting my new secondhand clothes in order. She prays now. She says, blah, 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 blah. So mother does her final duty of getting him prepared because he's declared he's leaving. Then, she prays now. She says that I may learn in my own life and away from home and friends what the heart is and what it means. Amen. So be it. And then he breaks with the mother right there. Welcome, O life.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience.
Mm. Mm. That's right.
Mm.
But isn't that brilliant too? It's
Mm.
like it's like your own experience. Like he's always going forward. What's behind is behind, but he's going forward, and it will be his experience that he will learn from.
Mhm. But he still has a tradition there. I mean, he literally himself has not gone forth for the millionth time. I think that the expression millionth time is a recognition that he is in a very long line of artists and creators,
Mhm.
which is the
yeah.
tradition that he will depend upon. And then that is crystallized in the old father, old artificer.
Mhm.
He may have gone forth in his mind, perhaps, whereas
Mhm.
now he's physically going forth.
He's taking it on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I may just be coming from my own call it a prejudice of as well, is that people who do make who make a major break are usually feel that they have some kind of connection with a line of spiritual ancestors that came before them.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the almost a necessary ingredient to be able to break away from one's immediate culture, family, religion, etc.
Yeah.
Anyway, quite something.
Mm.
There's a statue on Dublin Bay. I kind of not quite sure when it went up. 1988, it was put on, so it overlooks the Dublin Bay that Joyce sailed out of.
Oh.
And that's the statue. This is a children's book, school book. And that's the
Oh.
statue that's there. It's
Hmm.
not very much
Wow.
visited. It's Icarus getting ready to fly.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it stands over the sea that Joyce sailed away on.
Wow.
Wow.
Didn't Icarus fall?
Yeah, he went too
but
He flew
close.
too close to the sun.
Yeah, he didn't follow orders. The dad told him how to fly and he wouldn't follow orders. But that's Daedalus himself, you see, the great artificer, the great inventor of the labyrinth of the Minotaur and all this sort of stuff. But I think that's kind of Joyce in mind, the guy who did that,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
maybe the
think
very
so.
words we've just read,
Yes.
Yeah. So what is the name of that statue? Does it have a name?
I don't know the name of it.
Okay.
Hey, the name of it is here. Thus Daedalus flew.
Huh.
Thus,
Oh,
Daedalus.
Thus Daedalus flew. Yeah, so
Huh.
that's ambiguous. It could be
Yeah.
Daedalus Papa or Daedalus the son,
Yeah.
the
Wow.
later son.
I would be very interested to know the process by which that statue was conceived
Yeah.
and approved. I mean, that's a, I don't know if you've read Consuming, was it Consuming Joyce?
Joyce. Mhm.
Consuming
Uh,
Joyce, yeah.
Yeah, by John, what's John's name?
McCourt.
Yeah.
McCourt.
John McCourt, 100 years of
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
Ireland culturally went through to get to the point of actually accepting Joyce. It's a great book
yeah.
if you haven't read it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like,
It is.
Actually, I haven't read that. I must get it. But
I strongly
Oh, it's
suggest it's
brilliant.
good. It's really good. I've often thought it would make just a lot of the quotations if someone
Yes.
the bull by the horns and put all the quotations together and created a theatrical piece.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
That it would be, I mean, because many of the
Yeah.
quotations are just like, they're great.
Mm-hmm.
When we're done here, I'll Google the name Neil O'Neill, That's who the name of the sculptor.
Huh.
And Dust
That-
Daedalus Flew. There might be a little account of it, and if there's anything
Yeah.
of interest, I'll forward it
Yeah.
to Duncan.
I would think that it comes right at the time when Ireland is now trying to reclaim Joyce.
Yeah, 88.
Yeah. Yeah, they're trying to reclaim him and honor
Yeah.
him, and they named a ship after him, and they want to name an airport after him.
I know.
They want they want to go to Zurich and get the body, bring it
They want
back.
to bring the body back, yeah. But it's the tourist
Yeah.
brigade, you know. they're-
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like these are all publicans and
Yeah,
tour operators, and you know, today we're in Dublin, tomorrow is Egypt, you know. But, that's not the brigade. They didn't even realize, you know, that there was more than Joyce buried in the cemetery.
yeah.
They
And
started talking like that, but it gets shut
Here's
down.
a statue like yours, Joe.
Let's see.
go
Up a bit?
lift it
Hold on.
higher.
Hold up a little higher and let me.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
Oh, wow.
that's the flying. That's airborne, and
Yeah.
they is that a statue?
It is. It's a landmark sculpture for Daedalus Common in Fareham.
in what?
Fareham, Fareham. I don't know where that is.
UK, isn't it? In
UK,
England?
I presume. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is a kid's book. You know, it's the book kids used to learn Latin from, and there's drawing very like it there.
Mm.
You know, it's aimed at kind of 12 to 15-year-olds. Look what a 12 to 15-year-old could read back then.
Yeah.
You know, so, but
It's such a great, the original mythology is such a
Yeah.
great story because it's a double-edged story.
mm,
I mean, you know, it can be taught as a warning not to try,
yeah,
because or it can be framed as of course is happening here in Portrait of an Artist, as an encouragement that if you have the strength to
Mm.
break away, that you should try. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting story.
yeah.
Mhm.
It makes you more tolerant of teenagers. You know, they all have these decisions to make, and I wouldn't like to be brought back to being 18 years old again.
Mhm.
I survived once. I don't know.
Yeah, barely.
That
I'd like
was
to be
a-
brought
that
back to
was a
about
pretty tough
28.
case. That was a
Once is
pretty
enough,
tough
I think.
Once is enough. Like I must say, Cranley there tonight, you know,
Mm.
he would have persuaded me to stay.
Crowley was a great sounding board.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Stephen had, he was comfortable enough to confide in him so much.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, even
Yeah.
though he kind of in his mind pushes Cranley away, you know, by overlaying Cranley the person with some pretty negative stuff.
Yeah.
Mind. I mean, his images of Cranley. What was the
Yeah.
thing about the priest? You know, we go back to the thing where he was looking at Cranley from the back of Cranley's head. That was one of the earlier parts, and then
Yeah.
after discussion with Cranley, he has some things where he's trying to emotionally distance himself from Cranley's arguments.
Yeah.
Well, Cranley's trying to get him to compromise, to fabricate a
Yeah.
position that he doesn't hold.
Right,
And
right,
Stephen
right.
goes by what he really thinks.
Well,
Yeah.
but look what he has to do
Yeah.
to kind of neutralize Cranley. First of all, he
Mhm.
doesn't know Cranley's parents, but he
Mhm.
decides that Cranley's father is an old man and
Mhm.
Cranley's mother has tired loins.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, you know, which is all ways of saying, well, you know, Cranley says that sort of thing because he's from tired stock, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he is having to struggle, and I would be I would have to say is using some not entirely cricket tools to neutralize Cranley's argument,
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
he can't quite overcome the argument as argument.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
He oscillates
Mhm.
with
Mhm.
Cranley. It's exactly the way those friendships worked, you know, guys you were at school with, and suddenly they were all different from you, doing something you weren't doing, and you were doing, you know, no longer the common ground of school, and you pull one way and another, and some of them fall away and others stay in your friendship, you know, in your company.
Mhm.
And
It's
some of them fall away, and then lo and behold, decades later,
yeah,
um, paths cross again,
and that's
and
it.
relationship is fruitful again.
Yeah, with distance, which is exactly, isn't it, what happened with Cranley and or whatever his name is. Cranley is Byrne, isn't that his name? John Byrne. Cranley
Mhm.
is John Byrne. Isn't that exactly what happened with Joyce? That he was in the end his good friend. You know, they had a
That
friendship.
they kind of encompass that whole thing with two phrases at the beginning. There was something that was said that brought them together, and at
Mm.
the end there was something said that was the end of their friendship.
Yeah.
That was kind of quick.
Yeah, and you could feel the sadness.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well,
interesting how Joyce also references contemporaries or even Dante. I'm referring to his comment about Yeats. Yeats, the lover's embrace, and this was line 27-25. When the arms wrap her around, he presses in his arms the loveliness which has long faded from the world. Not this, not at all. I desire to press in my arms the loveliness which has not yet come into the world. So Yeats looks back
Backwards.
at the loss, sitting by the fire, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Joyce is looking forward to a new experience.
And that's exactly the way we look on him now, isn't it?
Mhm.
When we think of Yeats and Joyce, exactly.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Joyce really represents the new Ireland that we have.
Yeah.
now. And
Another thing that I didn't comment on, but was his mention of the guy in England that what's his name? He's the one who comes back from Africa, and he has looked at how the
Belgians.
Belgians have
Your Casement, I think you're
Roger Casement. Roger Casement was mentioned here, but Casement isn't executed by the British as a traitor until 1916. So the book said in 1904, he could only mention Casement as having done these studies.
in the Congo. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
Mhm. Or Dante. I was thinking of this, you know, we talk about how Joyce was so influenced by Dante. You know, Dante is creating the character Dante in the Divine Comedy. And it may or may not have been exactly Dante's life. But I'm thinking here, Joyce is creating Stephen Dedalus, and we all assume it's the portrait of himself as an artist, but he may also be fabricating or developing it as an artist, creating the writing rather than a
man called Davy Doyle, who used to look after the portrait side of Swinney's. He would always say, don't forget the letter A. It starts this title. A portrait.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes.
There could be many portraits. This
Yeah.
is one
Yeah. And it's a portrait of the artist.
of the artist as a young man,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
a portrait.
A portrait.
And because, you know, people would always say, because X, Y, and Z, ergo, therefore, you know, and he would say, don't forget, this is only one of many possible
Yeah.
portraits. And
Mhm.
he was very good at it, you know.
Yeah.
Isn't this classic Joyce, though, where he leaves things sort of with questions on them, and
Yeah.
you can
Mhm.
interpret it whatever way you want,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
no interpretation is wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all inclusive.
Well,
Yeah.
there are multiple interpretive possibilities, but it's almost like, Joyce creating a story of himself outside of himself. So he has that to think about and to reflect on,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
which is,
Mhm.
Hmm.
so I have a couple of minutia questions, if I may.
Please.
Just in case, I would like to know, who is Michael Robartes? And
Michael-
April 6th, later, Michael Robartes remembers forgotten beauty, and when his arms wrap her around, he presses in his arms the loveliness.
This is a quotation from Yeats's poem, Michael Robartes Remembers Forgotten Beauty,
Oh,
later retitled He Remembers Forgotten Beauty. Originally published in The Wind Among the Reeds in 1899, it begins, "When my arms wrap you round, I press my heart upon the loveliness that has long faded from the world."
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
Great.
That's the point that was made earlier about the
Yeah.
backward looking and the
mhm.
forward looking.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And then
Gosh,
there was,
there's a lot in it, isn't there?
Hmm.
You had a number of things, Duncan.
John Alphonsus Morinin. April 14th, John Alphonsus Morinin has just returned from the west of Ireland. European and Asiatic papers, please copy.
Joyce is here composing a mock obituary notice of the kind then published for the Gaelic revival. The journalist is reporting on the quaint speech of the Western peasant, itself a mockery of the dialects used by Lady Gregory and John Millington Synge in their plays, and disseminating it worldwide. I'm just reading from the notes at the back of my edition. It's not that I know these things,
Right? No, that's
though.
okay.
but there are very good notes in mine. Yeah.
Mhm.
So part of what's going on in the diary thing is he's making some other breakaway. He's breaking away again from Yeats, and he's breaking away from the Gaelic League.
Revival. Yeah.
And of course, he breaks away from over Tundish. He's breaking away from the Dean of Studies. Damn the Dean of Studies and his funnel.
Mhm.
And of course,
Mhm.
Lady
Yeah.
Gregory
Those-
and Synge would have been associated with Yeats as well. So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
putting that aside.
Mhm. Okay, that's great.
Mm.
So we
Cool.
we will be coming back to this again at some point.
Oh, good.
But next time we meet, we will be going on to Stephen Hero.
Good.
mhm.
Excellent.
And so I do need to ask directly here. You saw what I was attempting to do with the share screen, which is to bring up the Gutenberg edition.
Mhm.
I want to know if it was too distracting, or can you imagine it being helpful? Like, what should I do next time?
I think it
Have
would be
we all-
helpful if you need it. I like to see everybody's faces. I
Yeah.
kind of miss the group.
Mm.
I had trouble with it because I didn't feel like I could watch the book and that at the same time.
Yeah.
Have we all got a copy of Stephen Hero, I suppose?
That's
Yeah,
the
I do.
question. Yeah.
I haven't yet, but I'm not going to be here next week, so hopefully I'll have one by the time we get to the second night reading.
Right.
Okay.
It is
Well,
available. Gutenberg is read as well.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, but you know, you might want to make note that the copy is available through Gutenberg for those who can't get the book by the time we start
Oh, I
reading
will.
it.
I will. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put the
Or,
note-
Orla, could I just mention, I think you weren't in when I mentioned this earlier, my copy arrived from amazon.co.uk this morning.
Hmm.
Oh, very good.
It came to a princely sum of €9.70, including €2.80 in postage.
Very good. Very
Wow.
good.
Whereas you can get a hard copy down in the Ulysses bookshop in Duke Street for €75.
Oh,
No, David there sells collector's items. You don't need like there's mine, hardcover, 10
Oh.
bucks as well.
Yeah.
And loads more of them there. And
yeah,
got
and
your-
my copy is the Norton edition. And I cannot find it's from the library, and I cannot find a copy to buy, but it has great commentary and
Yeah.
articles in the
Yeah.
back. I mean, it really fills out the story from the famine on through.
what's the edition?
It's called the Norton Critical Edition.
Right.
Of which are you talking about?
A portrait
Portrait?
of the artist. Yeah,
Okay.
Hero.
Oh, sorry.
I've tried thrift books and
Okay.
half price books and stuff, but I would love a copy of this version.
Yeah.
So I will not, I will not use the screen share, except unless it's needed to tune someone in
Yeah.
to where we are.
That's wonderful to have it as a backup.
Mhm.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
It is. The first time I've ever seen that done.
It's actually very easy,
Yeah.
particularly if I'd had more practice at it, I could have done it more smoothly. And I was started off by experimenting with using my Kindle copy, but I'm gonna have to play with that on my own to see
Yeah.
how to handle that.
So were you driving the?
Yeah, I was
So
driving.
you
I
you
was
have to
driving-
do that.
Yeah, I was the one who was driving it.
Yeah.
A bit awkwardly, but it's
Yeah.
like every other talent, a little practice, you get better at it.
If it goes on for a
I'm
long
into-
time, you have a lot of work there.
I'm
It's
into
become a
Buddhist
thing,
book club.
Joe. Sorry, Orla, go ahead, please.
Sorry, my screen has gone black, so you can't see me or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm into sort of Buddhist reading book clubs, and they use a Kindle, and people read, and it bookmarks. They can bookmark it, but I've never used it myself. They link the Kindle to their computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what I was reading on today, although
Okay.
there was some pretty bad mistakes
Yeah.
in
It's the
I
backlight
found
is
words that
useful.
were spelled
found
incorrectly, that
I
kind of
found-
stuff.
I
You're
found
turning
another
into
way-
John Kidd, Duncan.
I found a way of finding books instead of going into like Thrift or Amazon by just typing in the name of the book and the author. You can come up with a whole slew of places where you can
Close, yeah.
find their books.
Google
Great,
does the brain
thanks.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Or you can try ABE books,
Yeah.
which are mostly secondhand.
Amazon.
Maybe
I
it's
think-
very good.
I think it's
Yeah.
Amazon. Hey,
Yeah, it's owned by Amazon.
It's part of Amazon now.
Yeah.
I use a lot of them. I use thrift books in the United States only
yeah.
because they have a great shipping policy and they give
Yeah.
you credits and a free book
Yeah.
every once in a while. And
Yeah.
always, if they've only sent me bad copies a couple of times, and I just send them a note and say, "Hey, that book is terrible," and they instantly give me a
Send you another?
Yeah.
Yeah, I use thrift too. That's
This
my
is Thrift?
favorite. Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, I mean, you can, if you order $15 worth of books, the shipping is free.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah, but
the-
we're in Ireland, so I mean, what happened when the book club started was there was a difference when Britain left the EU.
Yeah.
There was
Mhm.
a problem with Amazon and all of them getting books from the UK,
yeah.
and so I thought I'd be funny, and I went on Amazon US to try and get them to send them in, and I got the books, but I haven't since tried to because you're supposed to do it through Germany or somewhere.
Yeah, what you do if you go onto Amazon.de or .de, the German Amazon or French, the book will arrive quicker than from the UK, from Germany. Like it'll be 48 hours because they have Amazon have a depot here down in Baldonnel. So
That's right.
you know the most used books are shipping out of Baldonnel. It's effectively an Irish Amazon, but you order it on DE and you're buying in euros, so you're not screwed over the conversion into this bloody currency they have on that island. And you know, it's a lot. I stopped buying it from the UK altogether.
Yeah.
I find if I go into amazon.co.uk, if I go into the US.com,
Yeah.
falls to .co.uk, whether I like it or not.
Yeah. Well,
But yes, the book that I just received was posted to me from Germany.
Yeah. The only problem is I ordered one book, you know, and it was secondhand, and it was all the English version. It said, but it arrived in German.
Yeah, that's what I was.
No.
Duncan said, you know, and I said, you know, this is a book I didn't order in a language I don't understand. And they said, don't worry about it. Hang on to it. We'll send you the right one. They sent me another one in German. So I said, I see how they lost the war, you know. Forget about it. I won't buy the book. I'd have a room full of these books by now.
Oh,
But that was exceptional. It was secondhand, and it was kind of strange. And clearly, you know, it wasn't Amazon. It was an Amazon sub agent. So, but I like it's faster than it was from the UK. You know,
I got some from Blackwell. Is there something called Blackwell?
Yeah, it's a publisher in the UK, I believe.
Yeah, I
So-
think so.
It's a big publisher. I mean, they
Mhm.
they print books all over the world for different markets, but it's a big UK publisher.
Yeah, well, sadly, I'm not going to spend 75 quid on Stephen Hero because I'll probably spill tea on it or something. So I'm going to see, there's a bookshop in Dublin called Chapters, and it has no.
No, you're far quicker to get to Amazon by certainty. But you see, Ulysses, like they're all collector's items, you know, that he's selling, you know. So like if you buy there, you want to insure it. You know, it's
Oh yeah.
like he says.
I tried all the bookshops in Dublin, including Chapters, Hodges, Figgis, all of those. Even the Freebird down in Westmoreland Street.
Yeah.
And they're still looking at me when I was asking for Stephen Hero.
Yeah, you're far better to do Amazon.de and done.
Okay, and the one after that is Exiles, is it? Have you chosen the book that's going to come after that?
Is-
Okay. Well, someone will have to talk me into Exiles.
Isn't that a play?
It's a play.
It is a play, and I've always gotten the impression that it's a little painful.
It's a sore experience, but it's worthwhile.
Okay.
Because you know, here you see the great man not able to do it. You know, because he only wrote 2 plays, I think, and the first one he himself tore up.
We had talked previously about doing Dubliners somewhere down the line.
Yeah. Well, I think we should. Of course, at this particular time, you know, I'm raring to get back to Portrait of an Artist. but I will temper myself.
Yeah.
And we'll do Stephen Hero, and then we'll have as we get maybe 3 or 4 weeks away from finishing Stephen
Yeah.
Hero, we'll
Yeah.
have a good conversation and make a decision about what's next, whether it's Exiles or Dubliners or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's been lovely. Thank
Yes.
Oh, it has been a
Wonderful.
wonderful experience reading this.
you. Yeah.
I read it 50 years ago. That scared me.
Wow.
If it makes you feel any better, John, I read it 50 years ago when I was in
Oh,
college.
good. Oh, good.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me
50
too, more
years
than
ago-
that.
John, 50 years ago, I tried to read it and I didn't understand it.
Well, you were too young.
I, well,
I think-
to my eternal shame, I remember throwing it away.
Oh dear.
But that's how dumb a kid I was. I wasn't that young.
Well, people, I follow all kinds of reading
Yeah.
groups and all that, and people say, "Oh God, I tried this book, and
Yeah.
it's just terrible," and I always say, there's probably a reason that other people think this is a good book, unless you just don't have any room. Put it on your bookshelf.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a good chance that you'll be circling back and
Yeah.
looking at it with new eyes in a decade or two.
That's so
I've
true.
had the opposite experience also. I've adored a book and then gone back to it and not liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I had this book freshman year in college, and that was almost 60 years ago. The same copy.
Mhm.
Didn't understand a word,
Mhm.
but I learned a lot somehow.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember it.
Yeah.
It's in great condition, Katrina.
I know. I've
Untouched
tracked it
by
around
human
for
hand.
years.
Yeah.
Well, probably back when the time when they printed on good paper,
Yeah.
Yeah.
with
That's
good
lovely
ink,
to
and
have.
put a good cover on them.
Yeah,
Sure, have
yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Anyway, I want to thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Duncan.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Duncan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great
And
fun.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Everybody.
that was
Thank
great.
Duncan,
That was
Thank you.
great.
Very
Thank
grateful
you.
for this.